color. The continuing story of Peyton Place. Starring Dorothy Malone as Constance Mackenzie, Ed Nelson as Michael Rossi, Ryan O'Neill as Rodney Harrington, Barbara Parkins as Betty Anderson, Tim O'Connor as Elliot Carson, Christopher Connolly as Norman Harrington, Patricia Morrow as Rita Harrington, James Douglas as Stephen Cord.
Rachel Wells had been pulled out of her night school class by an emergency. A telephone message telling her that Elliot Carson is waiting for her outside, ready to take her home immediately. To Rachel, an emergency at home might mean that something has happened to the Carson baby, or perhaps even Elliot's wife, Constance. Disturbed and puzzled, Rachel looks for Elliot Carson and finds Jack Chandler.
I've come to take you home.
You sent that message just to get me out here.
We're leaving this town. Together.
The police are looking for you.
Looking for me in this old truck. Now, you come on. You liked it when I told you about Mexico. It sounded good to you, you said.
No.
I'm finished playing hide-and-go-seek with you, Rachel. We're going to Mexico tonight. 2 or 3 days, we'll be there. We're going now, Rachel. We're going now. Nice and gentle and quiet. That's the way it has to be.
Why don't you let me do that? Just because you own this dump doesn't mean you can have all the fun.
How's Rita?
Oh, dancing up a storm.
Well, that's good. I thought maybe that was the reason you were late.
No, I had to give my State of the Union address, and the applause lasts a little bit longer than I'd figured. What's new with you?
Oh, well, let's see. Mr. Sweeney's brakes still squeak, and price of brake shoes went up about 1.5 cents.
Oh. You, read any new wills lately?
How's that?
I said, how's grandfather?
The same, I guess.
What's that mean?
If you want to carry on a conversation with yourself, go right ahead. I got some things I've got to do.
Spent a few jolly months with our half-brother, and he told me about grandfather's new will. Tell you the zinger? You mean the zinger that you have to marry Betty before she can cash in grandfather's chips?
Doesn't make sense.
Does that go for the guy that thought it up?
What else did Steven tell you?
Wait a minute, there's a question on the floor. If the will is fantastic, strange, bizarre, and not to mention a wee bit unusual, what does that make the guy that thought it up?
Beginning to sound like a disinherited relative.
That's what it was the last time I looked.
A disinherited relative who's trying to get his hands on some of that loot, huh?
You sound like you're humming the wedding march, getting ready to take another trip down the aisle with Betty.
All that in a few minutes? Steven must talk pretty fast, Norman.
Maybe I'm just a good listener. And maybe I'm just a little bit worried about grandfather. And maybe I'd like to find out if there's any truth to what Steven said.
Why, so you can have him committed?
No, so I can help him.
Help him? You slam the door in his face every time he's come near you. Why don't you make up your mind?
That's what I'm trying to do, Rod.
Look at us. In a couple of seconds, it'll be tire irons at 50 yards. Rough one up for Steven.
He made sense.
Yeah, that's his specialty. You know he just wants you on his side.
I know Steven's got a white flag in one hand and a hatchet in the other. But it's...
What? What is it, Noah?
Rita sure picked a good time to get sick. I'm still working on my first $1 million.
Well, then talk to grandfather. He still knows who he is, and he knows who you are. Well, you've got as much right to that money as anybody. Maybe more.
That's what Steven said.
You're not gonna help Rita or grandfather by siding with Steven.
So far, he's the only one that's offered to help.
Don't do it, Norm. Don't join Steven.
Whatever I do, whatever I have to do, I do for Rita.
Oh, boy. This ought to frost poor old Wilson.
I thought it was just a letter of protest.
Well, even a letter of protest should have a little style to it.
Sounds like a vaudeville skit to me.
Just because Fred Wilson is the principal of the high school, it doesn't mean he hasn't got a sense of humor.
Let me see what you've been writing here. Stuffy, pompous, and desperately Victorian.
Yes.
If anybody said that about me, it wouldn't tickle my funny bone.
Well, I'm not saying it about him. No, it's not very far from wrong. It's just that the reading assignments in Rachel's English class are a little dated, that's all.
And stuffy and pompous.
And distressingly Victorian.
And the next time you see Fred Wilson, duck.
How can they expect to cultivate an 18-year-old girl's interest in literature by boring her to death with the books on this list here?
I thought Mike Rossi was taking care of Rachel's education.
Well, it's his idea, yeah, but that doesn't mean I can't take an interest in it.
You haven't heard Rachel complain about what she has to read, have you?
No, but...
And she's doing all right in school, isn't she?
Well, yes, as far as I know, she is, yeah.
Well, then what do you want to stick your nose in for?
Now, look, Dad, she's living in my house, and she's being treated almost like a daughter, so that gives me some kind of responsibility.
Now, hold on. Responsibility not only to Rachel.
Now, what do you mean by that?
You ought to be at home, curled up on the couch with a nice, cool drink in your hand.
Boy, well, I will be in a while.
Don't you get tired sitting here all day working on this old newspaper?
Well, this paper practically takes care of itself.
What about Connie?
Well, Connie looks after Matthew.
Oh, so that makes you free as a bird.
Well, more or less.
Why don't you find something else to do and leave Rachel alone?
No, because this is important, at least to me.
Elliot?
Now, Dad, I'm not going to finish this thing if you keep interrupting me.
Remember the promise you made when Rachel first came to you and Connie?
I promised myself lots of things. Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Yes, I remember. I promised not to make the same mistakes I made with Allison.
That you wouldn't push her, that you wouldn't be her father every minute of the day. Isn't that what you want to do?
Of course, that's what I want to do. This is a... You're right. This is just another attempt to jump feet first right into Rachel's life. Only she needs the freedom more than I need the involvement.
You've just made a giant step.
Oh, yeah? Feels like I just picked up a nail.
Captain.
Bruise your knuckles, Weber?
I want to talk to you, old man.
I'm busy.
Well, that's tough.
I dismissed you for the night.
Yeah, you got me out of the way for the night. But now I stopped by Ada's and I had a drink.
One, I'm really not interested in your social life.
Oh, you're really, really not interested in my social life. Well, why not?
Weber?
Oh, don't you Weber me, old man. You made yourself a part of this. Now, Ada told me how Sandy left town just a couple of hours ago. How she took a cab to White River and then how she hopped a plane to California.
Pleasure trip?
Well, you ought to know all about that. From what Ada says, you were the one that sent her.
Hardly.
Now, look, Sandy stopped by here tonight. She saw you.
Oh, did she?
Oh, now listen, old man, I want to find out what you did to her and what you said to her.
Get out.
I'm not going to get out of here until you tell me what happened to my wife.
Aren't you a little bit behind the times, Weber? Sandy's no longer your wife. She's filed for divorce.
She filed, but it's not finished. It takes a year to get a divorce in this state.
Hoping for a miracle, is that it?
No, I don't care what you do around here with Rodney and with Betty and with Steven and all the rest of those clowns. But you keep your sticky fingers out of my life.
Now, why should I have anything to do with Sandy?
Oh, you know, it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. I mean, she just wasn't the right girl for Goldilocks.
I presume you're referring to Rodney.
You bet I'm referring to Rodney.
Do you love her?
Yeah, I love her. And I almost stole her away from that creep.
Then what are you waiting for? Catch the next plane, follow her to California.
You know, I just might do that, old man. I just might do that.
Lee, it would be a mistake. Whether you admit it or not, Weber, you've outgrown her. Your tenure here with me in this house has broadened your horizons, enlarged your vistas. You've simply outgrown her. Do you remember the last time you entered this room without being asked?
Yeah, I remember the last time I entered this room without being asked. And if I remember right, you clobbered me with one of your canes.
I believed you reached for a glass of brandy that I hadn't offered.
That's right.
Well, now, if you still believe that I had anything to do with your wife's sudden departure, well, I wouldn't blame you in the least if you refused this drink, resigned your position, walked right out that door.
You know, maybe that Ada Jacks gets things all balled up. Huh? I guess all I can say is good luck, goodbye, and good riddance to Sandy. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe I am too good for her.
We mustn't be too harsh.
No, I mean, whoever got her off my back, maybe they were doing me a favor.
To your continued good sense. Good night, Lee.
Your cane, sir.
Ah, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.